Okay, welcome to our session about investing in diversity. And before we start, I have to tell you that I'm a 55-year-old man wearing glasses, having a dark suit, and North Face boots. Can you describe yourself, please?
Yes, of course.
I'm Jochen, by the way. I'm sorry, I'm Jochen.
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Katy Talikowska. I'm the CEO of the Valuable 500. My shoes are slightly less practical than Jochen's North Face boots, but I have some other ones in my bag. I'm a 50-year-old white woman. I have shoulder-length light brown hair, and today I'm wearing a, it's not real leather, skirt and a red polo neck.
And hello, everyone. My name is Ebru Özdemir. I'm the chair of Limak Holdings, which we're active in infrastructure and engineering. And I have blonde shoulder height hair, and gray suit with a tie, but not like a man's tie, but a tie with a lot of feathers. So it's very unusual.
Very nice.
I'm 50, but I hope I look like I'm 40.
Hi, I'm Duncan, Crabtree-Ireland. I'm the National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA, which is a labor union in the United States that represents actors, broadcast journalists, and recording artists, among others. And I am a 52-year-old man who also looks way younger, I'm sure, wearing glasses, a navy blue jacket, black shirt, khaki-colored pants.
Olá. Hi, everyone. I'm Luana Génot. I'm the Executive Director of IDBR, Identities Institute, Instituto Identidades do Brasil, and then we work with the intersection of race, gender, and equality in the workplace. So I'm a dark woman with dark skin and black lipstick, let's say wearing a red poncho, and happy to be here.
So welcome to our session. Diversity initiatives in many companies and countries have been highly successful, playing a key role in their overall performance. I repeat that sentence again. Diversity initiatives in many companies and countries have been highly successful, playing a key role in their overall performance. If for some reason this evidence-based statement sounds strange and causes you to feel certain cognitive dissonance this year, allow me to remind you of the following. For a huge backlash to happen, there must first have been a strong lash of progress beforehand. And if that seems too cynical to you, let me remind you of a second thing. It wasn't all that long ago that a larger part of the world began engaging with DEI. The first event on this topic in Davos, for example, where the LGBTQ community met, was just 11 years ago as a unofficial side event. And there's an LGBTQI leaders dinner only for the third time this year. In this panel, I would suggest that we not only lament the backlash in certain parts of the West, but also highlight positive examples from other parts of the world and explore where the many dimensions of diversity are treated, if the dimensions are treated equally. Positive examples like the global organization of over 500 companies working together to end disability exclusion. It's called the Valuable 500, but it's 529 now. And was just launched 2019 here at the World Economic Forum. It was joined by Apple, Coca-Cola, Daimler, Microsoft, Vodafone, and Twitter, now X.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, interesting.
Not anymore.
Interesting. And this is Katy Talikowska. She's the CEO. So welcome.
Thank you.
Luana Génot is the founder and CEO of Instituto Identidades do Brasil.
Wow, you did beautifully.
The Brazilian Identities Institute, an NGO that helps companies like Unilever, Disney, L'Oreal change their culture around Black employees. And the Institute has trained 700,000 employees so far in the real world. And there's a wonderful AI. I had the pleasure to talk yesterday night for some hours. We talk about that later. And this is Duncan, Crabtree-Ireland, the Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of the Screen Actors Guild in the US, the world's largest entertainment union. And so to speak, he's one of Hollywood's most powerful behind-the-scenes actors. And he's also one of the few out-leaders of a major entertainment group on this planet and fights for DEI in the industry. And Ebru Özdemir is one of and I think she is the most powerful Turkish businesswoman. She is chairperson of the board of Limak Holding, a huge conglomerate, but mainly in the construction business, I would say. One of Turkey's leading business groups with around 5 billion in turnover and 46,000 employees. And she also chairs the Limak Foundation, which has launched initiatives as the Engineer Girls of Turkey and Global Engineer Girls. So Ebru, what exactly do you do with your foundation and does it work?
Thank you very much. And I'm a civil engineer, and we were only 5 in our class out of 50. And then I started to work in our family company. Actually, my mother was the only woman engineer in her class in mechanical engineer. So we're always, we've been through this. Women do not like to be engineers. And to become an engineer, you have to be good in science and maths. But the families are like, if you're good in science and maths, they want you to become doctors because you take care of them when they're older, or teachers, easily get married. And then so we don't see many engineers not only in Turkey, but also in other countries. So we said that we need more women in STEM because there's a human capital. That's untapped human capital. And in today's world, the problems are very, very difficult to address only as men, I think. And also the projects are very complex as well. So for this reason, what we do is we want to empower more women in today's STEM world, in today's construction, infrastructure, and engineering world. So what we do is we give scholarships to the women who decide to be engineers. We give them mentors because, the women can become what they see. It's very important. It's like if they see a very good engineer who is very successful, they want to become an engineer. And the other thing is we're addressing self-confidence issues. We see that women, they don't raise their hands even they are qualified. And the third thing is we're trying to create this sisterhood among these women so that they support each other. They don't want to kill each other only for that one spot out of 50, but rather, why don't we have 5 spots out of 50? Actually, we'll be working for this till we have equality. So this is what we do. We empower women to choose STEM kind of professions.
There are local differences, but it's the same everywhere on the planet, I assume, and it's still the same basically today, right? So what can we learn from you?
Basically, it's the same problem. It doesn't mean that we have more engineers in Europe. We have the same problem. It's not in Africa, US, everywhere is the same problem. So what we try is, we even try to create a sisterhood among these countries. We started the project in Turkey. We went to Kosovo and Macedonia because we worked there. We signed an agreement with the biggest female university in the world in Saudi Arabia. And then now we are going to Spain and then to Africa. So what we are trying to build up is to show and prove that women can become successful engineers and they can work together with men in these complex problems. And we are proving this because now we see more and more women are really climbing up the ladders because we don't want any women. We want leaders, we want project managers, we want CEOs. So to do that, to be successful, we have to prove that this is doable. And 2 years ago, we won the Lighthouse Award in World Economic Forum. And this increased our visibility because we need awareness. And this also increased our collaboration among the other companies. Because to be an engineer, you need internships. Internship is a very vital element of a successful engineer. So by collaborating with these companies, these girls are getting internship possibilities. And then this becomes like a professional experience for them as well.
Mm-hmm. You're a leading businesswoman in Turkey. Turkey has a very low proportion of women in leadership compared to other countries of, I would say, the region, right? So it's something like 20% maybe women in leadership position. It's not perfect in other places, but in Northern Europe, it would be something like 40% maybe. So how is it for you to be a woman in such a prominent position in your daily life?
Actually, Turkey, we are much better than in some countries,
right,
except in Northern Europe, where they have quotas. For example, we are active in Kosovo. In Kosovo, they say that 50% of the board members has to be women. So in the countries that have quotas, we see more women representation.
Right.
But in Turkey, we have very, very successful women in different fields that we see. And we are just trying to increase that. I mean, overall in the world, we have like 20% participation of in engineering or in energy or in building materials. But it's more or less same around Europe or GCC countries. Now we see a lot of more women active in STEM areas in Saudi Arabia because they have a lot of active projects and they're rebuilding many new cities and so forth. Mm-hmm. So for myself, I'm coming from a family of engineers. My mother was an engineer. My father was an engineer. Our partners, my brother, my uncles, everybody is an engineer. So if I would not be an engineer, that would have been very difficult.
Very strange. Very strange.
Yes, and since childhood, I was in the construction sites, you know, going to summer holidays. We were going through the, the sites. We eat the most delicious food in the site and so forth. But I like to become an engineer, you know. I always liked. I always like building. We build the longest bridge in the world. And in my side of the business, you build and you see it. And, you know, there is something, the longest, bridge, highest dam, highest tower. So it's great to see the product.
You built the stadium in Barcelona, the new one,
We are working,
right?
yeah, currently we are working on to build a new stadium for Barcelona. Yes, and it's ongoing, and we are very proud of that. It's going to be the world's, probably the biggest stadium in the world.
Wow, okay.
Yes.
Luana.
We have many women working there, engineers.
How many?
10% still, but we brought them from Turkey. Mm-hmm. They worked before in Çanakkale Bridge,
right.
And then the tower of the central bank in Turkey, and now they're there. So we are actually trying to create the ecosystem.
Luana, more than half of Brazilians define themselves as black or brown. I hope that is correct. And I read in the coverage about you, basically, that 2016 data shows that black people hold only about 6% of management positions and are paid something like 44% less than, well, the other groups. So this was 10 years ago. Has anything changed?
Well, before I answer your question, I would like actually to remember why we're here, as exactly you said before.
Please do.
So I always invite people to imagine a world where every individual could thrive, regardless of their race, origin, gender. This is the world we want, right? And that's why we're here. Who is with me? So I think we agree mostly, right? So we need to somehow come back always to our vision, especially when we are facing turbulent times, right? So I think that's the base, and that is actually why we do what we do. And what we face in Brazil actually is not an exception. I mean, in most part of the world, we know what does a CEO looks like, and what does informal worker looks like. In Brazil, this is huge because Black and Indigenous population are in the majority of the population, but we don't get as much paid as the other half of the population. So this is a huge problem. And when we talk about inclusion, we are talking about growth, as you mentioned before. And I think, especially in a forum like that, we need to connect those two topics, because we are not talking about, oh, this is a charity, this is something that it's the right thing to do, is right, but it's smart. And Brazil is, we actually call Brazil as an airplane that flies with only one side of the airplane, the flight, so it doesn't go and doesn't fly actually as it could, because most of the population, as you just mentioned, are not doing as well or as they could do financially. So we need to unlock this growth. And McKinsey just released the report. We need to unlock this 12 trillion growth. And whoever is not doing inclusion is losing the opportunity to this growth, and either in Brazil or in other places. And I feel like, especially when we had the Diversity Equity Lighthouse that I had the honor to participate, we see that we are not talking only about numbers. We are talking about those little girls that every one of us we know that has a huge potential, but not making the way there, you know, is not earning a lot of money. So it happens in Brazil, but happens also in Saudi Arabia or happens in Turkey. And that's a global issue we need to tackle. And now we can use, for example, AI as we're using in Brazil with Debbie to potentialize safe spaces where people can talk about those topics, and we can recruit more people to actually, you know, have tough conversations, because sometimes it's tough talking about inclusion, right? It's tough about talking about identities for some part of the population. And we can make that easier with, for example, Debbie, the technology we developed, and so many different tools. So I think that is the change from 10 years from now. So the numbers kind of quite looks the same because it's a structural change that's in place, but we have more tools to potentialize the change we have, so the change we need. So now we need to use the tools to make this cultural shift that historically has been a burden for Brazil and for the rest of the world. So the aim here is like, let's do it together, especially in times like this, we need to collaborate more. And I urge you and all of us to transform, for example, fear into action. So inertia into collaboration, and I think we can move those numbers.
You said paradise, so I found this quote, paradise doesn't exist, you said, we have to build it. That's what you say. And how do you build paradise in companies? So there are 700,000 people out there that got educated by your foundation. What do you do there?
Well, we basically raise conversations that, for example, in Brazil, let's say the racial and gender literacy is very low. So we don't learn that at schools. So we don't learn about quotas. We don't learn about even our history. It's even easy for someone from Brazil to learn more about the French Revolution than the local stories we have there. So we actually found that actually the fact that we don't have contents about ourselves actually decreased engagement in the classrooms, just to give you an example, and increased dropout rates in the classrooms. So this is huge. So when I talk about inclusion, I talk about ways for us to decrease dropout rates. But also in the labor market, we can decrease turnover. And with the companies we've been working for the past 6-7 years, we were able to decrease in 10% the turnover because we put the content there inside of their academias where they can train employers and they can see the content related to their identity there, either if they are part of the LGBTQ communities or disabled communities there. They can see themselves reflected in a way they see, I'm part of this environment, I belong to this place. So it helps to engage people by developing new products, by developing new projects within the companies or in the surroundings. This is about unlocking economic growth by the end of the day. So we want to make sure that we raise these conversations, and now we can do it at scale because we are using AI, and now every individual in the company can have like very specific conversations about their own projects, their own careers. So it helps us to potentialize intentionally those conversations with AI. But it's just because we have a strong why. So AI won't solve the problems by its own. Yeah. We need a strong why we are using AI to shift the culture we need to shift.
Yeah. You can check it out. Can you say the name of the bot on Instagram? It's Deb something?
Yes, so I'll say in Portuguese and then I'll translate. So in Portuguese it's @chama a Deb, @chama Deb. But it's like, it would be arroba, like called Debbie. So Debbie, I mean, for us, it's just like a combination of identities of Brazil and the in-between, but somehow people think that goes for diversity, equity, and belonging, which also works for us.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure people belong to their workplace, and obviously we need, for Debbie to talk in English or to talk in German with people in German. But now we want to make sure that Debbie has a great user experience in Brazil, because when we translate those terms, like LGBTQ terms or racial terms in different cultures, it can be offensive. So we want to make sure that Debbie is well trained in different cultures and can pursue conversations that are meaningful to the people wherever she is. So. Yeah. Whoever wants can join us to develop more Debbie, and that's it.
I think it's a brilliant idea. I talked to Deb, and GPT translated the Portuguese for me all the time, because you can ask questions you wouldn't dare to ask in another environment in your company or wherever. So I find the idea brilliant. So you should roll it out in many languages.
Thank you.
Duncan, before we lament the backlash in the US, the US has so far been the promised land of DEI, I would say. So that's the lighthouse, right? Let's be positive. What have you achieved in the entertainment industry? You're really an industry icon. So this is the man who fought for actors who didn't want that their work would be stolen by AI and stuff like that. We had this strike in the gaming industry just recently. So you are the guy doing all that stuff. And you are married.
Yes.
In San Francisco, as far as I remember, 5 adopted kids, right?
Yes.
And you are also, I can say, an activist for the LGBT community.
Yeah.
So what's the situation until yesterday in the US?
Well, look, I mean, I don't accept that the events of yesterday or of November fundamentally change what we should be doing or the importance of DEI. And undoubtedly, there has been a backlash or an effort, let's say an organized effort to put pressure on companies in particular to back away from explicit DEI commitments. And I think there's a few things we can say about that. Number one, we can say there are really big, important companies who have resisted that pressure. Apple, Costco, just to name 2 that have been notable in just the past week. But many others as well, big and small. And so I do think that smart companies recognize that they want the best possible talent to work for them, whether it's in the entertainment industry where my work exists or in any industry. And the only way to get that is to be a welcoming place for everyone. And I love what Luana said. And by the way, I'm really inspired by all of the other panelists here. Just everything that y'all are doing is fantastic and inspirational. And I think we do want to have an environment that is about equality of opportunity. But we have to recognize that when people don't start from the same starting point, that means something has to be done to level the playing field. And that's, at least in the United States, that's the place that we're coming from. We want equal opportunity for everyone, but we want to do what it takes to actually have equal opportunity, not to just say we have equal opportunity when we don't. And so, we're continuing to encourage companies, certainly the labor movement, very much so, is looking to encourage companies to feel confident in maintaining DEI programs, inclusion programs. We are also looking at the concept of really embedding those programs in a less singular way, not necessarily having it as a department of inclusion or something, but spreading out across the organization and really making it everyone's responsibility to be inclusive, because that's more effective, A, and B, it's less susceptible to being targeted for political reasons when it's a need in the company. And I would just point out, some great examples of this even within our own industry. I mean, think about, people now think it's normal, but think about the advances, for example, in diverse casting. Take Bridgerton as an example. I know this is a
Yes.
popular series around the world from Netflix, you know, and quite rightly said, there's no reason we have to cast this the same way we've always cast everything before, and has been hugely successful. Other companies, you know, that like, for example, you know, Disney and Marvel and the Black Panther movies, you know, Squid Game and Netflix, there's a whole host of diverse casts and content that can resonate and do resonate with the public. These companies are doing the right thing, but they're doing it because it serves their corporate interest. It engages audiences. It serves their bottom line as well. And I think that's the beauty of it, is you can do the right thing and also do well by doing the right thing. And that's actually the truth of it. So in our case, in our last round of bargaining and the strike big strike we had in 2023, you know, we were fighting over a number of issues. You mentioned one of them, but I think AI is certainly a concern. And the big thing we are concerned about with AI is making sure that as you train AI systems, because obviously you're inherently training AI systems on existing material. And I'm setting aside the very important issues of consent and compensation for training data. But if you just look at the training data sets, if you just take those training data sets from the past, then you are encoding potentially past biases into these AI systems by training them on it. And so you have to have proactive measures to make sure that those past biases don't take over the output of these AI systems that are then seen as neutral or, you know, objective or whatever, when they're actually baking in decades potentially of, you know, questionable practices that we want to leave behind in the past. So I think there's so much we could talk about in these areas. And the last thing I'll just say is, you mentioned the strike in the video games. We're still on strike in video games over AI. So I just have to say that strike isn't over yet, even though I wish it were. It's more than 6 months in process. But these issues are things that workers, including my members, care deeply about and are willing to fight for.
Thank you. Katy, so even though the US is the land of DEI, as we heard, only 21% of people with a disability are employed there.
Yeah.
And I think on a global scale, it's something like 80 to 90% of people are not employed with disabilities. So it's clear that these people with disabilities are not always included in DEI efforts, to say the least. Why is that so? Is that a stupid question? So everyone's talking about DEI for 10, 20 years. Why did that happen?
Yeah. Well, it's an excellent question. And actually, the Valuable 500 was born out of a need to change that. Because if you look at things globally, over 1.6 billion people globally identify as living with a disability. So that's one in 7. Then when you add in friends and family, even if you're conservative, maybe only 3 or 4 family members, that nearly equates to over half of the population. So frankly, it is just nonsense and plain wrong not to include people with disabilities. And the other thing I would say on that is, for me, I think it's really important to stop thinking about the disabled community or people with disabilities as other and a separate community, because any of us at any time in our lives, through age, through accident, through illness, can become disabled. On a personal level, I'm a 50-year-old woman. 5 years ago, I had no understanding of sort of disability, certainly within my family. Since then, I now have 7 members of my family through accident, diagnosis, illness, and age who now identify as living with a disability. It is just a reality of our human condition. So to answer your question directly, Jochen, we were born out of the fact that, very rightly, in sort of, if we cast our minds back sort of 5-6 years or so ago, corporates were taking DE&I seriously for the first time, and they were appointing chief diversity inclusion officers. But our observation was that, very rightly, they were talking about sexual orientation, about race, about gender, but not about disability. And of course, disability is intersectional. So to put it bluntly, you can be black and gay and disabled. You can be straight and white and disabled. So again, it affects all of us. So it was wrong that no one was talking about disability. And we were born out of our fabulous founder, Caroline Casey's desire to get CEOs to end the to end the silence on disability. Now, I love what you were saying, sort of, Duncan, there about sort of targets on our back and sort of being deprioritized, because perversely, when we think about potential anti-woke kind of sort of backlash, I think from a disability perspective, perhaps the target on our back wasn't as big. But I think the key thing we all need to do, and I love the language that has been used, because really what I'm getting from it is that for all elements of diversity, it is about people, it is about talent, it is about humans first. And again, Luana, what you said, really what we all want, and I don't think anyone can deny this, is just to live in a world where every human, every person just has a chance. So I think the way to counter potentially any kind of negative headwinds, and certainly what we do at the Valuable 500, is to perhaps change the script, change the language. Don't focus so much on let's call it a diversity hire, but actually let's just talk about bringing everyone in and treating everyone equally. Because I think the moment that you're talking about something as other, then it's separate, it's siloed, people can deprioritize, they can ignore, they say, we'll come back to it later. So for me, that's really critical. And the last thing I'll say, if I may, is, again, one of the messages that has come through, and again, Luana, I love what you were saying about growth, and you've also touched on this, is fundamentally we need to understand that what is right for society is what is right for business, because business wants to grow, business wants to thrive, and business needs to survive. So again, if you think about it statistically, the global spending power of the disabled audience, let's call it as such, is $18.3 trillion. And again, I said 1 in 7 of the global population. Why would you, as a business, not want to tap into that $18.3 trillion? Why wouldn't you want to bring in more people to grow your brand, to use your services, to buy your products? So it just doesn't make sense from a business perspective. And then, of course, what you do is you bring in the voices into your companies, into your product development, into your service development, because then you can appeal to everybody. So maybe I'm an idealist, maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but I think if we reframe it and think about people and having high-performing, engaged talent that can bring in different, beautiful perspectives from different cultures, from different walks of life, then that's right for society and that's right for business.
You should not leave anyone behind, right?
100%, 100%. And, you know, we talk from a disabled perspective about nothing about us without us, which now in my mind is rightly changing to nothing without us. You know, bring in the voices of everybody within your go-to-market strategy as a business, and then you will sell more products, you will appeal to more people, and you will be more successful.
Can you share some best practice? What are the 529 companies are really doing?
Okay, so I'm going to let you into a secret. They're all operating at slightly different stages, and that's okay. The way we operate as a collective, as a big family of 529 companies, is through learning from each other. We talk about taking synchronized collective action, because all our companies, in and of their own right, are progressing and they are doing well. In fairness, it's interesting, perhaps not surprising, that the ones who are the most advanced and the most progressive also tend to be the most humble, and I think that's just a truth of human nature. But we exist as an organization because imagine the collective might of 529 companies. That's a combined market cap of $23 trillion and 24 million employees. If we can galvanize action so that all our companies are addressing the same problem at the same time, in the same way, that's when we're going to see system change. And we at the Valuable 500 work with our companies on 3 strategic areas of focus. So that's focusing on inclusive leadership, inclusive reporting. Data is really, really important. If you don't measure something, then you can't manage it and you can't improve. And also inclusive representation. So that's going back to my point of leaving no one behind and nothing about us without us. Authentically representing people with disabilities across the marketing mix. So we have those 3 areas of focus. But if I could focus on one thing that I think companies should do, is it's very important to implement strategies and initiatives and invest in inclusive best practice. But the culture is key. You have to create the right environment, I suppose, of psychological safety, where, to use an expression, everyone can bring their whole self to work. So we talk a lot about self-ID, self-identification, self-disclosure, increasingly talking to our companies. We want to talk about sharing. Okay, and again, that makes it a bit more open, a bit more generous of spirit. All of us, irrespective of our abilities, irrespective of our race, our gender, our sexual orientation, feel comfortable to say, this is me, I'm Katy, and this is how I want to do my best work for you. This is how I will be productive. This is how I will be engaged. This is how I will maximize my potential for you as an employer, and you in turn will get a return on investment. What's right for the employees, what's right for the employer. So we work with our companies a lot around initiatives, but also creating the right culture of trust, because I think it was, forgive me, I always get this slightly wrong, I think it was Peter Drucker, an American management consultant, who said that culture eats strategies for, I'm going to say lunch, it could have been breakfast or dinner. But the point being is that culture is absolutely key. So that's one of the critical things that we work with our companies to create the right environment. And my last thing, Jochen, I'm sorry, I talk a lot, is role modeling with leaders. So again, if you don't see it, you can't be it. So again, we work with our companies. We focus on C-suite leadership, not because we're hierarchical, but it's because it's the leaders who are in the driving seat of change. So if they come forward and share their stories, then that opens up that culture and they role model the best behavior, and then it's a win-win.
Thank you. Now that we're seeing this backlash against DEI in quite a few countries, not only the US, I was wondering, so there are stories all over the place. I read a big story in Wall Street Journal. DEI needs an overhaul. There's something went wrong. Did something go wrong? Are there communication flaws or flaws of thinking, or what would you say? Is there something you're thinking about that went wrong?
Well, for me, I think that what went wrong is the politicization of inclusion. And, you know, I don't lay that at the foot of any particular people, but the fact is, you know, and I think the points you just made are exactly right. I mean, all of the folks who need better diversity, better inclusion in the workplace, you know, they're our family. They are us, right? There's no reason that should be political football. And yet it has become that, at least in the United States, and I think, as you said, in other places. So I think that's the biggest challenge, because fundamentally what's right or wrong with it, there's nothing wrong with the concept. What's wrong is the politicization of it and the fact that it's been turned into and been weaponized in a certain way in politics. And so, but I think smart companies are realizing that they can opt out of that weaponization. Sometimes that's by using different terminology. Sometimes that's by a different structure, et cetera. That's by avoiding the label of woke while still actually doing the right thing and being inclusive. And I think those things can happen if we can. Yeah. But we all work to avoid politicization.
Yeah, I wanted to build on that because I completely agree. But I also wanted to add that we also need to see beyond the United States. We haven't seen that many examples of, you know, initiatives across the globe than years before. So we have a Lighthouse report, and we've been trying to recruit companies and organizations from across the globe. And then this year was like the record we had from good initiatives on DEI from, you know, from the Middle East or Latin America, where actually things are moving regardless of the odds, despite the odds. So obviously there is always room for improvement, and obviously we need to improve. We need to keep adapting the languages, because this is a global topic with local nuances. But we also need to look, obviously, the United States as a good example of what we could do, but also on the other side as well, in terms of the fight for their rights, the fight for democracy. I mean, not only looking specifically at this time of history, but also what we've been building throughout the years. I mean, there are a lot of voices that are put together, and then I would like to invite us to go also to see beyond the United States. So we can see a lot of things going on, a lot of initiatives, a lot of companies investing, obviously in different manners, in different rhythms, as Kate just mentioned. So we can see in different contexts. So I went to Japan and I see initiatives to raise, consciousness about the gender gap there. So it's incredible to see that there is actually a global coalition on inclusion, but the opportunity we have now is to collaborate more. I think that is exactly the key, because somehow we've been actually working in silos. So sometimes I'm doing the same work that maybe a place, I don't know, maybe in India, there's someone doing something similar. So now it's time for us to get united and to collaborate to fight this backlash that's like very noisy, for sure, but not bigger than the actions we can take together.
Ebru?
I mean, we are not doing anyone a favor. I mean, we are untapping the potential, the human potential that's untapped. I mean, in this capitalist world, or in this world that our companies has to survive, we have to be sustainable. Whatever we do, it has to be viable. What we are against is the prejudice. People saying that, okay, women, for example, cannot be engineers. They cannot do this. So we are against that. We need anyone who can be beneficial to this win-win situation. I mean, we cannot let some people out of this picture. We cannot leave some people behind because of gender or because of other, any issues. Because we see, as I'm managing the company, I'm giving job opportunities and I include people. And I see that what is excluded is actually beneficial for the company. They're better in, for example, from the women's side, because I do a lot of women's work. They're great in multitasking. They're great in, teamwork, analyticals. I mean, they are very loyal. So why should I leave this set of skills, away from my business? I need them. So you see, and this is the way I think I don't think that the backlash is going to be long-living. We need any kind of human capital to be successful and to be sustainable.
Yeah. The one thing I would add, I suppose, one of the key things we see is fear. So for some, it is a fear of other, perhaps jeopardizing their status quo, which for a long time has worked for them. So there's this fear of otherness. And I think, based on what we were all saying before, if you take that human first approach and you say this is all of us, then I think that will help. But I think also for some people, and I'm going to speak perhaps specifically from a disability inclusion perspective, for a lot of people, it isn't that they don't have good intent or they don't want to level the playing field, but there is a fear of getting it wrong, fear of causing offense, fear of using the wrong language. And I would say to people, stop obsessing about the language, because the truth is, you may get it wrong. So I run a disability inclusion charity, but I get it wrong too. Some people with disabilities want to be called a person with a disability because they want to see the person first. Others will say, I'm a disabled person because that is my identity and I want to own it. The reality is we need to stop worrying about language, but we need to create these safe spaces where people can be curious and they can understand and they can ask the right questions. And then I think organically you start to build those relationships and those barriers break down. And again, going back to the role of leadership, show some vulnerability. No one expects you to have all the answers, but just by starting those conversations, I think we can join forces more. We can bring in more recruits, because I think there are really good people out there, sorry for being really, simplistic, who it's not that they don't want to help us all fulfill our potential. They just perhaps don't know where to start, or they don't know the language to use the conversations. But I think you've just got to start and you've just got to ask questions, because again, it's cliched, but it's true. Together we are stronger. I think we need each other more than ever. We need to keep fighting the good fight.
And that language point is true, I think, across all of the intersections of
Yes.
equity, inclusion, diversity, because it's true with, as we would call them in my organization, PWDs, performance disabilities, but it's LGBTQ, every category. We should worry less about the nomenclature and the language and more about the substance.
Yeah, but I also wanted to add about the safe spaces. Katy, you're completely right. A lot of people actually reported to us that they didn't feel safe to talk about race, gender, LGBTQ because they were afraid of being canceled.
Yeah.
So that's why we are using AI to build those safe spaces and somehow help to foster the dialogue.
Yeah.
We are in Switzerland, so we have 30 seconds, 29 seconds, 28 seconds
Counting down.
left. And I wanted to ask you a last question. What does it mean to be a truly inclusive leader in today's context, this challenging context, and in the years ahead? What does it mean to be a truly inclusive leader?
Leave no one behind, for me.
Thank you.
Listen more than you talk.
Thank you.
Keep investing in diversity.
Thank you.
Show your vulnerability, show your human side.
Thank you very much for this great panel.
Thank you.